Subscribe to his YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any update.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to the 10th session of Ask Me Anything on Facebook Live hosted by Inc42. This is Pallav from Inc42 team, and we are live from Innovate co-working space in Delhi today. So, for our today's show, we have a very impressive guest with us who has seen both Indian and Silicon Valley startup ecosystem up close. He spent a few years at Google working on some of the most important products like Google News and building a suite of mobile applications including YouTube and Gmail. He also headed Motorola's software division and brought fresh experience to the market through Motorola handsets. And his stupendous journey then brought him to Flipkart, where he served as a chief product officer managing a team of 400 people. And now he's trying to revolutionize the healthcare industry with his new startup, Robin. So I'm delighted to welcome Punit Soni, CEO of Robin. Welcome to the show, Punit.
Thank you.
All right, so for everyone who's tuned in right now, Punit is the master of building scalable tech products. So this is a golden opportunity for you to put forward your best questions and tap into his unparalleled knowledge. You can drop in your questions in the comment section and Punit will be taking them up shortly. So Punit, let's do this session in two parts. I'll take first 15 minutes of your time for a couple of questions and then you can start taking questions from the audience.
Sure.
All right. So Punit, to begin with, how's the progress on Robin so far? I know it is still in stealth mode, so what can you tell us about Robin and the core idea that you're developing right now?
It's in stealth. So we'll talk about it. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I landed in Delhi today morning, so if I seem very sleepy and tired to you guys, it's mostly because it's like 3 a.m. or something in my time right now. But thank you. Robin is doing very well. We're about 6 months into our journey at this point of time. Our offices are in Redwood City in the Valley.
Right.
In the last year or so, we have figured out what the idea was. We have built a really strong team. Most of my folks come from the usual suspects: Google, Salesforce, Apple, and a few other places like that. So we have some really strong people.
Right.
As is pretty obvious, we are in the healthcare space.
Yes.
I am reluctant to tell you a lot about the product at this point, to be honest. What I can tell you is that it's testing really core skills on our end, for all the way from consumer design to machine learning to voice stack. Basically, at this point of time, it feels like a lot of work has gone in. So there's an early pilot that's come together. We are testing it in a couple of doctors' office. We're learning a lot from it. But there's a long way to go. So I'll keep it ambiguous. But hopefully by January we'll be ready to come out with the product and tell everybody a lot more.
Perfect. Awesome. So you've headed the product development at some of the most innovative companies in the world, Google, Flipkart, and they are at a massive scale, right? So how does a product development philosophy or process differs in these innovative companies, and what are some of the skills or elements that you would say startups should pick from these giants?
I think it's very hard to compare what we get in a Google with what we have to do when we're a startup. It's been a long time since I did a startup, and so it's personally a very fresh and a new experience for me. In Google, you assume a lot of things. I think you were talking about 1 million active users. In Google, if you built a product and it had only 1 million active users, most people come and console you and say, "We're very sorry. I hope the next time you can build a product that's better." So the scale at which Google operates is very different.
Right.
The kind of infrastructure that's available is very different. But the philosophy is not too different. The question that I ask everybody, whether they're a product manager in Google or whether they're starting their own company, is what problem are you really solving? You should be able to articulate that. If you know what problem you're solving, if you know who you're solving it a thesis that you can then test and iterate on it, then you have a shot at building something.
Right.
So I personally actually care less, even though when you were asking me, Robin was giving you peripheral information, I care less about how much money you've raised and who you have got in your team, and the fact that you may have some early revenue also. The question is, do you actually have a problem statement that you're completely convinced about? And do you believe that you have a solution, or at least a thesis for a solution that you want to test out? And so I would say that's the early principles, first principles that a lot of companies like Google really embrace, and I would say most startups should look at that also.
All right. So are you also trying to build Robin into something that will touch probably tens of millions of lives, or is it of that scale? As you said, Google's philosophy that 1 million active users is nothing, probably. So are you trying to replicate the same with Robin as well?
I think that the greatest tech company ever built is going to be built in healthcare.
All right, that's interesting.
And it's going to be bigger than Google, it's going to be bigger than Amazon, it's going to be bigger than Facebook. Now, I don't know if Robin will be that. There's a 0.001% chance that we might be that. But I do know that if I was going to do a startup, I should do it in a space where there's a shot, a very, very small shot that is possible. Healthcare is 20% of US's GDP. It's also a double-digit percentage of the world GDP. I think the numbers are something like annual spend of $3 trillion annually in US and about $10 trillion in the world. That's larger than e-commerce, social networking, and search.
Right.
And so the amount of data created, the amount of money spent, and the perpetuity in which that money is spent makes healthcare probably the richest space where the greatest company in technology can be built.
Right.
So that's fundamentally the reason why we actually even ventured into this space.
Right.
Now, who's going to do it? Is it going to happen now, or is it going to happen 10 years from now? I don't know. But if we are successful in our mission, then over a period of years or decades, we might actually fundamentally change the health stack as it stands. The high level vision behind the company is to rethink the health stack using machine learning and voice, and move it away from the 90s style crap software that most of it is running on.
So you worked in both Indian startup ecosystem as well as Silicon Valley. So you're familiar with the intricacies of product development process in both the regions, right? So do you see any difference in the basic mindset in both the regions? And like, if you can probably highlight any elements that you think are missing in the Indian startup ecosystem as compared to Valley, or the other way around?
I think that the Indian ecosystem is the most exciting startup ecosystem in the world right now, and it's because of its people. It's because of you guys. I think that it has the largest concentration of young people in the world who are actually trying to build companies of their own. And so it's going to be a rough ride. There's going to be quite a few years and a lot of failed startups. But I do believe that one of the greatest companies in the world, in league with Google, etc., is going to come out of India. And it'll happen in the next few years. And so I think that fundamentally the potential of India is way bigger than almost any place in the world. What Valley has is a degree of sophistication around it that's unparalleled. I wanted to start a company. I went and I spent 6 months honing a thesis. Once I had a thesis, then I actually went and met probably the best investors you can ever find in this space. We went on a hike, and we went on 2 hikes in 2 weeks, and basically over that time we decided how we're going to actually kick this company off. And then everything starts falling in place. The lawyers know exactly what they need to do. The go-to-market folks know exactly what they need to do. My head of design, brand speech recognition at Apple, my engineers are all from Google and Salesforce. You get the best, absolute best people to start attacking the problem from different angles. I have, doctors who are MDs from the best medical universities in the world working in the team. It's very hard anywhere in the world to put together a team from Google, best medical universities in the world, Apple, best venture capitalists together to actually do this. So what Valley does is it actually gives you within a radius of about 40 square miles the smartest people from every category in the world, and loads of it, not just one or two, hundreds of it. And so that's something that will take some time to replicate anywhere, let alone India. And so I would say that's probably the most fundamental difference between India and Bay Area.
All right. So taking from your point, I mean, there are a lot of product startup companies that are coming up in India right now, and one of the top concerns of entrepreneurs building a product in India is to find good people and structure the team right and attack the problem, as you said, in the right way. So from your experience, what do you look for when you're building a product team, and how do you think, in the initial stages at least, how do you think the team should be structured?
It all depends on what problem you're solving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am solving a problem in healthcare. I have no experience in healthcare whatsoever. I've never worked in healthcare. Mm-hmm. It took me like 5-6 months to even understand the basic language of healthcare. It was very obvious to me that I would be able to figure out how to build a product, but I would not understand how to do go-to-market.
Right.
So one of the first people I hired is actually somebody who's done sales and go-to-market in 3 healthcare systems or tech companies over the last 15 years. It was pretty obvious to me that I need somebody who's actually a clinician, because they will understand how the product can work, more than just a product I can. So I hired MD MBA from Stanford, who was also built in EMR and has been a trauma surgeon, taking care of gunshots and burn injuries for 6 years as my head of product. And so you have to ask yourself what your problem is. Then you have to identify the vacuums in your skill set for that. In my case, I needed go-to-market. I needed somebody who would do product. I needed speech recognition, but design. So that's why I got the guy who actually ran speech recognition at Apple. And then I needed somebody who understood enterprise systems very well. And that's why I got my CTO. My CTO ran all of infrastructure at Salesforce. And so you can build a team once you have identified what skill sets do you need. And you can identify what skill sets you need once you've identified the problem you're solving and what do you have. Right. If you go about it in that structured way, the best people will want to come and work for you. So you have to start by figuring out what the problem is.
Right. Cool. So with your new startup, Robin, you're leveraging the AI technology and the health tech industry. How do you think the artificial intelligence technologies will play a role in the health tech in future, and also in a country like India where the basics are not ready? Do you think the market is sort of ready to accept these futuristic technologies?
Oh, there is no option.
Okay.
I don't think it matters if the market is ready or not. It's going to happen. Okay. The question is just in what timelines it's going to happen. India actually is very ready. There's large swaths of the country that actually have leapfrogged digitization in different ways. The India stack, including Aadhaar, etc., means there's an identification protocol for the country. Especially some of the better health systems are creating a lot of data for per person as a patient comes in. And then there is just genius in terms of the talent here, in terms of figuring out what modern cutting-edge machine learning algorithms and AI is going to be. So from my perspective, it's just a matter of time that this is going to happen. It's not just going to happen in healthcare, it will happen in transportation, it will happen in everything. I think there's no concept of saying that I'm building an AI or an ML company. It's kind of like saying I'm building a C++ company. It's like, it doesn't matter. Every single thing that you know, every single company that you know is going to be fundamentally altered by machine learning. And the question just is going to happen this year or 2 or 3 years, but everybody is going to be influenced.
Right, perfect. So you're traveling quite a lot on this Indian trip. So what's your goal of coming to India?
When I left, I had said that I would do 1 or 2 things. Either I'd build a product that will actually be deployed in India, or I would actually build a team that would actually be part of that.
Right.
I guess I'm trying to see exactly where things are in healthcare in India. I'm trying to meet different teams who have actually worked in this space. I'm trying to see the expertise of people, and I'm also trying to expose myself to some of the better healthcare trends and technologies that are happening in the country. I really don't have any goal as in I have to leave the country having identified a site where we're going to start a team, or I have to leave a country by knowing exactly the two teams that I might want to actually integrate or work with in Robin. Right now, I'm just think of it like a fact-finding mission. I'm just learning. It may be 6 months to a year before I actually do anything tangible in the country, but you can't do that unless you actually walk around and talk to people.
True that. All right. So with that, I think we can open the questions coming in from people, and I would let you take over completely.
Okay. Gaurav Raj Sinha asks, do you think India is a market mature enough for an AI-based healthcare service? I think you asked this question too.
Yes.
I think that you have to define what AI-based healthcare service means, first of all. Artificial intelligence is a very loose term. These days, if you want to raise money, you can just say you're doing artificial intelligence and then somebody will put some money in you. But the question is, what does it really mean? Does it mean machine learning? Does it mean voice? Does it mean what exactly is an AI-based healthcare service? If the idea is that there is something that will learn over time the various patterns of treatment and then figure out a way to automate a large part of it, which if somebody was building a consumer-facing product they would want to do, I would say that the maturity in the market basically depends upon data. How much data do you have access to? And the data will depend upon digitization and what part of the stack has been digitized and who's actually done it. And so from my perspective, by some token, no market is mature enough because the data is not it's structured in a way that it can be used that seamlessly. On the other hand, if you actually find the right entry point and the right way to actually go and capture this data, any market can be mature. I think India is ready. Anything that you build now, whether you build it here or in China or US, is going to be 3 to 5 years before it becomes significant enough. And so in that time frame, with the right go-to-market and entry point, there's a shot that you can do this. Amit says, in one of your interviews, you said that the problems I want to solve are easier to find in US. Can you throw some light on it? I actually probably meant something slightly different. I said it will be easier for me to solve them in US. That's because most of my network is there. Most of the talent that I want to attract is there. The problems, there are interesting problems to solve in India too. But doing a startup is hard. And when you do a startup, it's hard enough that you have to find a problem and then you have to attract a team and then you have to raise money and then you have to put it all together. You want to do it from a position of strength. And for me, to be in the valley and do a startup is a position of strength. If I was in India, sure, I would probably be able to attract capital and a team, but it'll still not be as easy as it would be to attract some of the best people in the world as it is for me in the valley. And so that's kind of why I'm actually starting there. If luck has it, and if my product actually is successful, I'm sure that one day it will be in India too. Arpit says, you managed a huge team of 400. What was the most difficult decision you ever had to take? I think that, I don't know if it's 400. I think there were more people actually. In Motorola, there were a few hundred people too. I think the most difficult decision you take is when you decide that you want to streamline your team. In Moto, there was a time when there were 250 PMs in my org. I had to cut it down to, I think, 30. So basically, there was a period of 2 weeks where I was going from room to room, personally letting go of people. That sucks. It was pretty hard. So I would say what's the most difficult decision? More than decision, I would say the most difficult personal experience was actually having to let go of people, some of whom were extraordinary, but we just didn't have the space for them. As with anything in life, that's probably the hardest thing to do in professional setups. Sonia Cabra says, what is the difference between the role of a CPO in a big organization versus a young startup? In a big organization, the head of product's job is to be the voice of the consumer. The head of product brings an idealism to the table about what the vision was and what we want to build that's sometimes untainted by the tactical and real pressures of sales and what we need to do to keep the company moving immediately. The head of product also spends a lot of time being the glue that joins or marries the sales org, the design org, and the engineering org with each other. In many ways, you are a tactician, you are a diplomat, you're an idealist, and it's a pretty hard role to have, especially in a large company. I would say in a small startup, for most part, there should be no chief product officer. The founder and the CEO is the chief product officer. I actually did get a head of product who's different, mostly because I'm building something in healthcare, and I needed a person who had actually spent a lot of time as a doctor in health systems. And no matter what I do, I just don't have the expertise to put myself in the shoes of clinicians. But unless that's the situation you're in, there is really no reason to have a chief product officer in a startup. You're just wasting money. Rakesh says there are many companies using AI to solve healthcare challenge in USA, but in India there's hardly any work in AI in healthcare apart from a few companies applying computer vision in pathology and radiology diagnosis. But AI also plays a huge role in administrative workflow, etc., etc. Why do you think enough is not being done in this space, and what are the challenges one would face while building AI applications? I don't know if enough is being done or not, to be honest. I feel that nobody does. I think there are hundreds of startups being started in the country all the time. There is more startups started in this country than most places in the world right now. And so, from my perspective, it would be a pretty bad assumption to make that there's not enough AI/ML stuff happening in healthcare. We just don't know them. I suspect that anything that most companies are building, including what Robin's doing, there must be a couple of companies here that are actually trying to attack the same problem. So I think there is a lot going on in India too. Imad asks, congrats on Robin, eager to know more about the business when you're ready. Of course, happy to tell you more about the business when I'm ready. In context of consumer apps, any interesting distribution strategies that you've seen to get to the first 10,000 users? Consumer is basically a crapshoot, man. After having spent most of my career doing consumer, I can tell you some of my worst products have been big successes, and some of my best products have actually failed. So I'm really, if anybody comes to you and tells you they know exactly how to distribute and get to the first 10,000, 100,000 users, they're just bullshitting you, to be honest. I think that the best you can do is make sure that you have identified a problem that's so seminal that it is pretty clear that it makes a fundamental difference in anybody who uses it. If you have that, then typical things like targeting it in Facebook to try and see you can get a few users to see how they actually adapt to it. Trying to actually create micro demographics, so going into either a school or a college or university or a particular geography or wherever you have either density of network because of location or interest is a good place to start. But ultimately, nothing beats knowing that the product actually really is needed. The truth is, such a fundamental thing, a lot of people miss it because people get wedded to their ideas and they think they have something. But if you actually step away from it, sometimes you realize you don't. And that's probably the best way to figure out if the first 10,000 users will show up or not. Mukesh Jha says, what do you think about the way products are developed in India? It's a very broad question, Mukesh. I don't know what really you mean, so I'll create a question out of it and see what do you think about the way tech products typically are developed in the country. I would say that there is increasing maturity in terms of product development. The role of head of product didn't really exist only a few years ago. People didn't really understand what it meant. And no, it doesn't mean you do whatever the founder or the CEO tells you to do. It actually means you have a very strong point of view. You're the voice of the consumer. You're the one who's actually going to really figure out how to put everything together. I think that it's happening slowly and steadily. The CEOs and founders in the country still have a tendency to be very hierarchical and push through what they really think that needs to be done. But slowly and steadily, as more and more companies become successful, we will have role models, the right kind of role models show up that will help kind of people realize that a relatively autonomous setup is actually much better for product development than a hierarchical setup. And so I would say that that's probably one of the things that I'd like to see more of happen in the country. It definitely happens a lot in the valley. I have to spend a lot of time arguing with everybody to get anything done. But on the flip side, the Socratic method of discussion means that fewer bad decisions are made.
Just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Any particular Indian products that you really admire?
Yeah, I love Zomato a lot. I think it's really cool. I think that they have done an incredible job. It's a beautiful consumer experience. It's world class. It actually adds a lot of value, and they have now the network effect.
Right.
It's fascinating. The other day, it showed up in Los Altos of all places, and there was stuff there that was relatively rich too. So I'm excited about Zomato a lot. I think Vijay is doing some incredible work with ATM. He's a hustler. I love the way he operates. He's a true entrepreneur. I think that the company has tremendous potential. So I think that's another company. I think the probably the greatest companies in India will actually be in enterprise space. They will not be necessarily in pure consumer beyond these one or two companies that are really good. And so when that happens, Zoho and others that you talk about actually I think are the ones to really look out for out of India. Hi Punit, sorry for being vague, but what is your take on a startup which has built a strong B2B product and has the first 20 customers on board within a month, and the team decides to take the product further out to millions by developing a B2C aspect of the same simultaneously? You're being vague, Bhavesh. So hard to answer. If you have a product that actually is a strong B2B and has first 20 customers, why are you distracting yourself by doing anything else? You should probably focus on making sure those 20 customers are happy, and then you can see if they will actually retain you. And if that happens and you start building some annual recurring revenue, then you have a great company. Why do you want to distract yourself by doing anything else? Sorry, I don't know the details of your company, but that's kind of what I think. Ajinkya Jagtap says, what do you think about the diabetes management market in India? Why has it not been cracked till now? Ajinkya, there's 100 diabetes management companies in the world, probably hundreds. It's like the easiest, it's not the easiest, it's the most common place people start because there's a lot of diabetic people. Management actually does help. Some people actually build full stack hardware plus software. Some people only do software. Some people go from the employee angle. Some people go directly to consumers. It's a hard space because unless you're really sick, most people don't really use healthcare products. And so there is a small percent of diabetics who will actually probably care to use it, but most others are not very good at actually using these products. I don't know which companies in India have started this, but I would not be surprised that there are some companies that are actually trying to crack the diabetic market here too. Okay, Ananya says, what are your key learnings at Flipkart and do they help you in your entrepreneurial journey today? It's a good question. I think that, Flipkart is a mammoth company. It's not really a startup by any account whatsoever. It's almost 10, 15,000 people if you catch all of the other operations people in the team also. They have massive infusions of cash. The way they operate and the problems that Flipkart has to solve are very, very different from what has to be solved when you're doing a small startup. So I would say it's very hard to translate the learnings. The one thing I will say is that I think there are few people I know who are bigger hustlers than Sachin and Vinny are. And if there's anything you can learn when you start your own company is that you just need to hustle. And there's going to be pretty bad days and there are going to be pretty good days. But if you put your head to it, there's a shot that you'll get through it. I think that's probably the biggest lesson that one can learn out of Flipkart. It's any company that's successful, let alone has the success of Flipkart, is a miracle. Because 99% of all startups die. And so what you have is an order of miracle that's almost unbelievable in Flipkart, and I think we should all appreciate that. Aditya says there is a lot of knowledge available online on how to build an MVP, but very little about how to go from MVP to a mainstream product. If we have done market validation through MVP, how do we move it to a standalone product? Well, actually, it's interesting. because that's kind of where we are. We have validated that our MVP may work. Now we are trying to figure out how to actually build it scale it to the next level of a real working product that can operate on its own. I think that the best way to do that is through your customers. If you have an MVP, you must have deployed it somewhere. If you have deployed it somewhere, there must be a lot of people who are actually using it, or at least some people who are using it. I would probably sit very close to them and listen to them. And I would prioritize my products based on features, based on what I'm hearing from the field, combined with obviously my vision. And then I would just make sure I can go from a pilot stage to a place where they actually want to use it at a larger scale, to a place where they want to perhaps write you a small check, to a place where there is a shot that you have recurring revenue. And all of this just depends upon whether you are able to listen carefully to the customer and be able to do things you need to do. So I think, there is unfortunately no magic sauce here. But if you have an MVP, you have a pilot. And that's a good place to start as you build the larger product. So Sunny says, how's the e-commerce scene in India for a multi-channel order management startup? What opportunities do you see? Again, it's pretty broad. There's a lot of opportunities. I think the e-commerce scene in US feels like it's consolidated around Amazon, to be honest. But there's a lot of niche players who have recently popped up. And I'm sure that they need a lot of help across the stack. So I'm sure that there is a lot of potential, definitely more potential than almost any country in the world today. Akbar says, welcome to India. Is Robin into healthcare with AI? Yeah, I mean, AI is such a broad term, as I said. Anything is AI these days. In 2000s, if you wanted to start a company and get funding, you would just say, I'm doing so social, local, mobile, and people would just throw money at you. Now people just say AI and people throw money at you. I think, so yeah, we are broadly into AI, but what does it mean? If you're machine learning, voice stack, those are kind of things that we're really working on. Ajinkya says, talking about India where doctor to patient ratio is very less, don't you think doctors are resistant to change? Doctors are resistant to change everywhere, man. It has nothing to do with India. Doctors are highly opinionated professionals who are in a position of strength. If you go to a doctor, basically whatever the doctor says, you listen. That's all they get every day, day in, day out. People listen to them. So it actually makes you very opinionated and strong-minded. It's very hard to build products for people who are like that. On the flip side, they also have very clear needs and clear opinions of what actually works and what doesn't work. So the trick is to actually listen carefully, pick out what you think the need is from that conversation, and not necessarily pick out product insights from them necessarily. They may not be the best product managers, but they will be really good at articulating what problems they have. So Ankan says, do you think an app-only approach is feasible today, or should a company develop both mobile and web app? I think it doesn't make much sense to have an app-only approach at all. You should have an app-first approach. You should have a mobile-first approach. You should always build depending on what product you're building. There's for example, you're building WhatsApp. I suspect that it's okay to actually be app-only. You can have a desktop presence, but it's not really that material. But for most products that consumer, there will be a percentage of people and percentage of use cases that are only fulfilled through desktop. And so I would say that having a mobile-oriented approach is key because the majority of users are going to come from mobile, but doesn't mean you have to have only mobile. Arnab says, if someone is to start a startup now, be it a product or e-commerce, what are the 10 tips of do's and don'ts you'd like to share? Man, 10 is a lot. So let me kind of just give you 2 or 3 and then, we'll take it from there. I think, I don't know, when product or e-commerce again is very broad, but if you're going to start a startup, the first thing you should do is figure out which general space you want to start it. Okay, so let's say you want to start it in healthcare, because that's what I did. Then the next thing you should do is you should spend 4 to 6 months embedded in a large health system. I actually went and spent 4 to 6 months in a large health system in the East Coast. I would shadow doctors all day. I would eat lunches in break rooms with nurses and LPNs. I would go for drinks with CMOs and CIOs. I would basically live and breathe the life of a health system from a patient perspective, from a doctor perspective, from an administrative perspective. And when you do all of that, you come up with a variety of theses. These are the problems that I see. These are the issues that I think we should try to attack. And then when you have these theses, then you actually go up and try to come up with solutions for them. And then you talk to these people and you say, what do you think? Do you think this will work? Some of the best ideas I got, or actually I had like 3 or 4 ideas in healthcare, and all of them were like thrown out of the window because I would go to a break room and have lunch with nurses, and I would tell them, and they're pretty good at like scolding you if you have shitty ideas. And so I would basically get like smacked. I said, this is such a bad idea. Not only will I never use it, I'll make sure nobody else uses it. Then you know your product's not going to work. So the best advice I can give you if you're going to start a company is to go and immerse yourself in the life of that consumer 24/7. Just live that life. The more you live that life, the more you listen to who are the people who move the needle in that stack, the higher chances are that you will have found a real problem. And nothing matters more in a startup, my friend, than actually finding a real problem. There's so many people who actually just get wedded to an idea, and then they basically just waste years trying to make that idea come to fruition when it's not a real problem. Ananya says, would you be open to working with any Indian startup venture in the future, or have you invested in Indian startups, or do you plan to do so in the future? Of course. I think I'm doing my own startup. So I really don't have time to work with any other startup, Indian or otherwise. If I did that, then my startup's not doing well. But I have invested in Indian startups. I'll continue to do them. I stand by what I said. I think India is going to be one of the greatest, most interesting places to build startups in the world, all thanks to people like you guys. I also believe that a lot of probably one of the biggest companies in the world in the next few years is going to come out of the country. So I want to invest. I want to participate. I want to come here. I want to do these ask me anything. I want to stay connected to you guys. And so yes, absolutely, this matters.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, that was a great show, and I think a lot of wise advice from Punit. So Punit, thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing more of Robin and a lot more of what you have in store with Robin. And there are many more AMAs coming up on Inc42. So thank you again for all of you to join us, and we'll see you soon. And thank you again, Punit, for joining us.
Take care.